So today we're talking about Vanguard boxes. What we're looking at is a position that you're starting an army. 99% of the time, you go to the Vanguard box first. It has a bunch of models in it. They're at a steep discount, and it's a good starting place. So what we're going to look at is five of those armies. We looked at eight last week, five today, and we're going to talk about what's in the box, what's good in the box, what's maybe not so good in the box, and then we're about what you go out and do with it, basically. But before we start, we have a lovely PowerPoint presentation, which everybody likes to see during the day at work. So we'll give you another one in the evening. And the first thing we're going to be talking about today is the Maggotkin of Nurgle. Ben with us is a Nurgle player. He does have deodorant, so it's not all too bad. And the first thing we're going to talk about is the Maggotkin of Nurgle Vanguard. What we have done is today we're recording, it's the 14th of September. So there was a data slate or a balance update. The points are now reflective of that balance state. So these are the points as they are now. If you look at our old videos, we just see this cut up a little bit. And we've put notes on it. So if you want to look at, we're going to have some videos of Skaven and Slaves, which will have the old points. Now the description of new points are there if you want to keep up with that. But whilst we're here, we're talking about the friendliest of the Chaos Gods, Mr. Nurgle. And in this box, £85 is flat across the board. You got, depending on how you build it, you got 720 or 800 points, and that comes to how you split the Blight Kings. Because you can put a Lord of Afflictions in one fly, or two flies and no Lord of Afflictions. But in this box, you definitely get a spoil pox Scrivener, 10 Plaguebearers, 5 creature Blight Kings, and then either 2 Blight Lords or 1 Blight Lord and 1 Lord of Affliction. But I'm not the expert. The man up and to my left is the expert. So Ben, could you tell us a little bit about what's in this box?
Right. Okay. This is quite an interesting box because it is actually, in my opinion, quite good value in terms of what you get if you're going down a particular avenue of whether you want to go with Nurgle. It splits either into the mortal side or the demon side, or you can have a mix of it. So what they've actually done is release this Vanguard box as a mix of the two, because you can see you've got the Scrivener, which is the hero on foot with his Plaguebearers. So they're actually complementary. They're working with one another. And then on the other side, you've got potentially a Lord of Afflictions, which is a great hero to have, a great general to have because of some of his command traits which he has, which you can apply, like Overpowering Stench. And that supports really nicely with the Blight Kings, which are quite...
What's Overpowering Stench?
Overpowering Stench is if you are within range of... let me just get the within range so I can just double check everything. It's to do with knocking out the ability to issue command points or receive command points. So if you're in a fight getting up close, if you are wholly within 12 inches, bear with me a second. My brain has just shut down. It has been one of those days. The Incubatch. Oh, hang on. I'm not looking at the right command ability. There is one where if you're slightly within range, they can't receive command points, but if you're wholly within range, they can't issue command points.
Yeah.
So quite good for getting up close and shutting down anything like all-out defense or all-out attack in that case. So yeah, quite powerful, especially as they're probably one of the most mobile units within that army. Aside from some of the monsters, which are pretty quick as well. So the script, the stream's just there. It is.
Yeah, sorry, it's just me putting into quite.
Right. So the Scrivener itself is pretty useful because it has some little things which you can apply onto the Plaguebearers themselves. In the combat phase, you've got the opportunity to either add one to the attacks, and Plaguebearers, as they only have one attack, hitting on 4s and 4s, it's nice to have 2 attacks each hitting on 4s and 4s. So that, which is quite nice, but there's also the option, instead of having the extra attack, having 1 to the rend as well. So, yeah. And there is also the issue of adding 1 to save rolls if you wanted to as well to your Plaguebearers. So you've got a menu.
What is Plaguebearer save?
The Plaguebearer save is 5, so you could knock that down to 4s.
So 4s and 5s to get rid of 2 wound plague bearers.
Yeah, they're very, very sticky. Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah.
So-
I had experience fighting a group of 20 of these once before, and they just would not go anywhere.
And obviously, outside the Vanguard, you can make it even more sticky. But we'll get to that after So the Lord of Afflictions, like I said, is a good general. In fact, you'll see most people when they're running Mortal lists will have Lord of Afflictions and then perhaps a big monster as an additional general. But it seems like the common go-to. So if you're looking at deciding whether to actually run 2 Puskull Blight Lords or 1, and with the Lord of Afflictions, they're both good options in that particular case, depending on what flavour of general you want. So,
Excellent.
So, the Putrid Blight Kings, I'm just checking. Yeah, we're on the right slide. So the Putrid Blight Kings, they're tanky boys, they are. And then there's a way of actually making them even tankier, which isn't included in the Vanguard set, but we can look at that. They've got 4 wounds each. They've got a save of 3, a ward of 5, because all Nurgle have got a ward of 5, which is really quite nice. They're disgustingly resilient. They've got lots and lots of attacks. So a small group of 5, which is quite nice when they're now fighting in single ranks. They can obviously be moved around. And yeah, they're hitting on 3s and 3s with 1 rend. So quite punchy as well in a fight. So what else we got? The Plaguebearers. If they're in groups of 5 or more, obviously the subtracting 1 from being shot at is quite nice. I don't think shooting's really much of a thing in its current handbook, but it's nice to have that option to actually have that reduced, the -1 to hit. So very nice indeed. Next slide.
The next one's a Dawnbringer, which will come on to the Harbinger comment next. So, because I've got a couple of questions about things I've seen here. And the main one is, last night is, first of all, for anyone who doesn't know, if you are listening into the Hobbit, a ward save is the rolls you make after you take damage. So having a 5-up ward save means if I get 4 wounds on you, you get another roll where 5-up gets rid of it, which is incredibly powerful as a mechanic. Could you just talk to us tactically how you, if I'm building a Nurgle army, tactically how should I be playing it?
If we're working with this Vanguard box as a starter point.
If you look at this as a starter box and then just in general for Nurgle.
Possibly, if I was starting off with this, I would look at aiming more towards the mortal side. It's leaning quite heavily on the mortal side. So you'd be looking at throwing up the middle, because I've made the mistakes, because they're quite a slow army, to try and avoid going around the flanks, to go up the centre, try and weather the storm from what comes in like the first 2 turns, and try and get up. And if they get up close, they're not really moving anywhere because of the resilience. It's about closing the distance. The Plaguebearers, personally, I'd utilise them perhaps for either holding objectives on the backfield or perhaps summoning. The reason why I say perhaps summoning, because you're looking at primarily a mortal army with demons, which can then be buffed by the Scrivener. They're not very punchy, whereupon the Blight Kings are, so you want to be getting them into combat as quickly as you can and hoping that they can take the punch. You'd be perhaps looking at the putrid Blight Lords on their wonderful, are they mosquitoes or flies, for perhaps attacking through the flanks, because they've got an 8-inch move, which is twice as much as everything else on foot. We want them coming around the sides on that one. In terms of how I'd go from this Vanguard, I'd buy another Vanguard, and that's pretty much exactly what I did. Because what you've got there, in effect, is you could end up with 10 Blight Kings. We know that they're quite punchy.
Yeah.
Even if you don't utilise all the Plaguebearers, Nurgle have ability to summon once they obtain enough points, and they're great for summoning and leaving on objectives because they're very sticky. You would end up with 3 putrid Blight, putrid Puskull Blight Lords. God, that's a mouthful. So we ended up with 3 of them, and in War Scroll builder, you can actually allocate a single, so you can actually have 3. You don't need them as a pair. You can add 1 to it as well. And the Lord of Afflictions would be my general if I was working with these 2 Vanguard boxes. I think it's an excellent starting point for a Nurgle army in general to get those Blight Kings or the Choice of Mortals. But really, this is to get your beak wet. It's, do you like the demon side? Do you like the mortals side?
Yeah.
And then from there is so many options. It's a good foundation because you've got 2 very good battle line, which are different in effect, but still disgustingly resilient.
Have you got anything about the Vanguard in your mind, Paul?
Well, in this set and everything, Ben kind of covered it off. By the way, because that's going to be one of my questions. Was from a Vanguard set, would this be something that you would suggest to buy? And clearly, it is. Having played Nurgle before on a couple of occasions, these things that you're seeing in the Vanguard box are exactly what you're currently seeing on the board. More so where the Plaguebearers after today have actually gone down in points. There's suggestions that perhaps there is now a Plaguebearer build that may be more viable as you'll have more models on the board. But like Ben said, you got the Blight Kings, you got Lord of Affliction there, and you got the Skrillpox Shrivener in there as well. So you've got a number of versatile models, units that are viable. There's no kind of a bad unit here in my opinion. So it's a good box.
Yeah, and it's also worth noting there's now a new battle tactic for Nurgle called Don't Squabble Children, where if you contest an objective with demons and mortals, it's 2 points. And if, like you say, you're summoning Plaguebearers, I can't remember it's like if you have to pick them beforehand, but having Plaguebearers and Blight Kings, that's 2 punchy demons. Oh, sorry, 2 punchy units that you throw onto an objective. And that's 2 points. And as you say, for a slow army, securing your backhold objective, getting those points there could be very, very beneficial. So what we'll do is there's only 1 extra unit in the Dawnbringers. So we'll do the Dawnbringers next, and then we'll open it up to talking about, right, we've got 2 Vanguard boxes. What would be next? So the Nurgle Dawnbringers, the Dawnbringer boxes are £5 cheaper. And in this case, if I'm right, it's less points. Yeah, it's less points. Most of it comes the same, but we now have the Harbinger of Decay, who is a new model. Well, this is a new model. The character existed beforehand, but they've updated him and made him an even iller horse, as if that horse was not having a bad enough day as it was. Now it's having a horrific day. So, Ben, could you talk to us about the Harbinger of Decay?
Yeah, okay. It's quite an interesting model. We were talking about his profile of his War Scroll, and we're looking at, he's either got the option to carry a Scythe or a Bell, and I'm on the fence about which one, and I'm kicking the can around, and I'll explain why. Because his Scythe, he's only got 2 attacks, but with damage 3. Okay, with 2 rends, so that can cut through most. But hitting on wounding on 3s and 3s. Now, if you're anything like me with an attack profile like that, you know it's going to be the 1 attack with 2 rend. So you're looking at 3 damage. The other option, like I mentioned, is to carry the Doom Bell, which is once per battle. So you only get to do this once, and so you've got to really think this out. In your hero phase, you can basically gong the bell. They love their bells. And every enemy unit within 14 inches, when it chimes, they hit a state of despair. All right? And you can then pick for those units within that 14 inches whether they have -1 for their move until your next hero phase, -1 to their run rolls, or -1 to their charge rolls.
I think it's all of them.
The following
effect apply.
Okay, that's
Yeah.
okay.
Nice.
Now we've got some meat on the bone here.
Okay, and for a slow army, actually, that's not actually a bad shout, because it's kind of almost leveling the playing field with manoeuvring. So it's like you're going to find it harder to run away, find it harder to charge into me. I want to charge into you, perhaps. So you're not getting pinned as such, because the thing about Nurgle, whenever you play against them, is if you get pinned, you're in a lot of trouble because you're going to spend a turn to delete, or maybe 2 turns to delete, and then you've got to slow crawl to wherever it was you're heading in the first place. So it is quite nice. Personally, I'd always choose the wrong option because that's what I do, and have to play a few games with the wrong option and then get told it's the wrong option. So I'd probably myself go with the Scythe, but I always choose the wrong option. So
take the bell is what you're saying. And to be fair, in this GHB, we have 2 tactics that are based on charging. And normally when it depends on you pick it, but if you look at our fight, when I pick those ones with Corn, I do cover movement for murder and other stuff. I'm thinking if you say, right, I need to make 2 charges, and then you dong the bell and you're like, right, -1, -1 to your charge move, it can cost a battle. It is, you're right, it's what is the pressure point you put that on is very different on the unit you pick. Like you throw it onto a Fire Slayer's unit, it's walking free, it's running at the most 5, and then it's going to have a 10-inch charge. But for some armies, they get +1 to their charges anyway with the banner. Very few people want to put themselves in a position where they're 11 inches out and making the charge. They're going to try to get themselves to 6, so they may not pick that back. It's interesting. But 3s and 3s are all out attack. So 2s and 3s, -2, 3, 6 damage. But that's the time as courtesy on live from the bottom half, we roll double 1s. That's just kind of what we do. So interesting. Any thoughts about the Harbinger, Paul?
I've never seen it on the board in the tournaments or in the matches I play, but it's a relatively new model, like you said. But it has potential, like where you were just saying there. Like as soon as you kind of pointed out that actually all those bonuses that Ben was saying, they're all cumulative. It's kind of hang on a second. It has legs. It has potential. I agree with Ben. You got the 2 options there: the Scythe or the Bell. And I think it really all comes down to your army build type, and then B, how you actually want to play with the model. But ultimately, it's a keeper. It's something that should be considered when building your Nurgle list, without a shadow of a doubt.
Yeah.
Well, I think that looking at the attack profile is one thing. It's the utility which it also offers on the War Scroll, which is the interesting side of things, because they do actually have a prayer, which as the game evolves, and that's what Nurgle want to do, they want to weather the distance, the harder it becomes. They have this ability called the Omens of Decay, which has a prayer, casting of 3. It's not a bad casting roll. And basically you can pick a unit within range of 14 inches, so quite a large area, especially as the game progresses and things getting closer and closer. Based on the round number, if you successfully cast that, it will take away that from their bravery. So if it's only turn 1, it's going to remove 1 from their bravery. But if you're on turn 5 and you pull that off, that's 5 away from their bravery, combined with their his ability also to, at the start of the combat phase or battle shock phase, on a 3+, you can decide whether they issue or receive command points. So when you're getting into the crux of it all, if you get that off and you time that right, and you've also got the prayer off there, you're at a point where you could actually cause a lot of hemorrhage through battle shock. So that could be quite nice in its own way, that they're not able to use Inspiring Presence.
Yeah, and if I'm right, can you explain? Right, so again, for people who have never played Nurgle have got a mechanic where every 6 a hit gives you a disease point. At the end of it, you're out without any adjustments to it, and there is one on the wheel of Nurgle. And a 4-up is a 4-up is a mortal wound.
Yes, for every 4-up, there's a maximum of 7 which you can stack on them. Yeah,
and that happens before battle shock. So you could be throwing your stuff in, doing all this stuff, and then disease pointing, and then you have to roll battle shock. So you're losing an extra 3 guys, then you're losing 5 off your bravery, and then you're picking up your models and you're walking away with them. The only thing what I like about this is that there's a lot of units we have in this game which have a lot of utility within 8 inches. Well, for me, within 8 inches, scaling within 13 inches. The trouble with that it's that 9 times out of 10 if I'm Skaven and someone's within 13 inches, it's killing a bunch of stuff, and I'm doing prayer rolls basically for myself. With Nurgle, you're not too worried about being within 40 inches because you might be behind 10 Blight King. And they're not getting through that to get to a hero. So you're right with utility. He can get into the crux of it. Like, you still got to protect him. I mean, you're not going to rely on that attack profile. It is a sick horse and it'll mean. But there's a lot there that you can actually get their heroes into the thick of it and be doing this stuff. Probably more protected than most armies, which is a really great.
Yeah, and combined with the Blight Kings, it's a good point. You just raised the mechanic of Nurgle, which is just sublime. Spread the disease because they're ever so happy. With all those Blight Kings with 5 attacks each, there's going to be a good few 6s, which are getting those mortals going to combine it all. So high volume of attacks. The -1 rend, often there is a lot of saves. It's the disease, which is the mechanic, which it slowly chips away at the opponents, which is a wonderful thing. So yeah, having that behind all those wall of attacks, high volume disease points going everywhere, and just go, no, you're not going to get any sort of a bravery roll on that. I mean, you look at it this way: you target a unit with 10 bravery, like Khorne Demons, for example, and you're knocking that down to 5.
Which is, for most demons, don't have great saves.
No.
Like even Plaguebearers are on a 5. My Bloodletter's on a 5. Pink Horrors are on a 6. Yeah, it's knocking that down and forcing Power Shock can get you through demons quickly. So I guess the question is, what's on the shopping list? What is out there for Nurgle that you would say are the bits that you did not get in these boxes, but are worthy of consideration?
My personal flavour would be Lord of Plagues, who's just what he does is basically, if he's within range of a unit of Blight Lords, he can add 1 extra to their attack profile. So getting that disease, so each of those Blight Kings now have 6 attacks each. So a unit of 5, laws of probability would say that you're sticking 6 wounds on, 6 disease rolls, right? Yeah. No, 5. Get the maths right, Ben. There's only 5 of them, 1 in 6 jab. So 5 disease points. So there's that combined with other elements. And they get to fight one after the other as well, which is quite nice. So you could say, he's going to say, you fight first to the Blight Kings, or I'm going to go first and then you go second. So there is that ability as well. So I think the only other place I can see that, I'm probably wrong, Nighthaunt have a similar mechanic, which we'll discuss later. Definitely a Lord of Plagues for myself. Some people like the Lord of Blights. I think it depends on the flavour of how you want to build your army and how you play those particular units. I really like the Maggot Lords. I usually have 2 in my list because they're a little bit more mobile, and I'd use them on the flanks. There's always the Glockkin.
Yeah.
No one likes a Glockkin. But what I've been doing with my lists, and I think they've put their points up since I last played it, would be the Rotmeyer Creed, which are the Warcry war bands with their blowpipes, because if you're going to spread disease, they are just brilliant, and screen them well, get the disease going, because when it hits a unit, if they're within range, I can't remember the exact mechanic, is it 6 inches, 3 inches? So when people have castled up and you're deep striking in because you've got certain units like Gut Rot Spume, who's allowing the deep strikes, you can actually get them to trigger, hits that unit, but the other unit, which is in 3 inches, also take exactly the same disease roll. So you can actually spread it quite quickly. You've got lots of choice, to be honest. I mean, if that's my mortal build approach, you could go down a completely different avenue and go with the demons side of things and start throwing in Nurglings. I would probably include a unit of Nurglings in my army as well, just for popping out, being sneaky, and getting the wheel of corruption going. Not the wheel of corruption.
Or
contagion points. Get the contagion points going, because they get one if they're outside their a unit wholly outside their territory, so you can get the disease. And people just don't ignore Nurglings. I think is the tip, because they can be deeply irritating. but it's a good distraction piece as well at the same time. It's 100 points versus people going to have to react, and it might buy you a little bit of time to get further up the board as well. So, yeah, that's my thoughts, Mike, I think.
Yeah, I think if you have 100 points at the back, I've got to send a stone horn back to deal with it. You're taking 400 points out of the game. It's the same with the Gnaw holes. It's 0 points to put a Gnaw hole in your opponent's territory, but at least 100 points on the sit by and make sure escape and jump out of it. So the economics of play, which is a vastly poncy way of saying it, but that's Paul, any final thoughts or questions about Nurgle?
No, to be honest, like Nurgle, although it's an army that I personally would never collect, it is an army that I have played against before on a number of occasions. And Ben's kind of summed it up well in the idea that it has good versatility. It may not be sitting high in the ratings at the moment on its success and win rate, but it's not to say it doesn't have its own merit. And I think confident players or experienced players behind such a force can actually do some good with it. It's not forced to kind of shrug off and think that it doesn't have the capability, because it does. It's just a shame to see that it's not achieving its results that it's duly deserves. So no particular questions. I think these Vanguard boxes are good options, definitely, without any shadow of a doubt.
Yeah, last week I said that I thought the Slayer Darkness was probably the best value for models on the table, with one of the highest value. I think this is the same place. I think everything in this box has a lot of utility, You would use it all quite easily. I think Nurgle is the reason I've never connected to Nurgle when I played in my mind is I couldn't stand painting them. I am a free color guy, and I need at least 4, and I'm doing it. But it's a really well designed army. Like the Wheel of Corruption, Contagion points, the lot you can do there. It's very mechanical. It's probably one of those easy to play simply, toughen up, don't die, walk forward. But to play well is really skilled.
Yeah,
there's got quite a big range of players you can have in that. So yeah, no, it's a 5-star box as far as I'm concerned.